Hey guys, how's it going? It's Baggins here, and today we are going to be talking about the weapon perk changes coming to New World with the July update. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, coming at the end of this month, there is going to be a change where having a perk on your weapon, for example, Refreshing Power Shot, is much more powerful than having it on your armor. You can see Refreshing Power Shot kills reduce this ability's cooldown by 52%, kills reduce this ability's cooldown by 96%. So in some cases, not all cases, perks are much more powerful on your weapon, and today we're going to be covering which ones you want to be looking for in particular and which ones you can skip or just leave on your armor. But first, before we get into that, a quick word from today's sponsor, MSI. The Clutch GM41 Lightweight V2 is a wired gaming mouse like no other. Weighing in at just 65 grams, it truly is ultra lightweight, allowing you to effortlessly move and aim with agility and accuracy. Its arm run switches are rated for up to 60 million clicks, and it's also capable of going up to 16,000 DPI with a 1 ms polling rate. If you're in the UK, France, or Ireland and are wanting to pick up the Clutch GM41, make sure you use my code BagginsTV at checkout, and you can receive yourself a free Lucky Plushie with every order. For those of you outside of those regions, fear not, there is still ways you can get involved in supporting the channel and supporting MSI. There will be another link in the description down below where you can play a series of mini games. Upon completing all of them, you can share your score on Twitter for the chance of winning a $50 Steam gift card and the other prizes that you can see on the screen here. So what are you guys waiting for? Make sure you use the links in the description down below. Once again, it is code BagginsTV at checkout if you're picking up the Clutch GM41 Lightweight V2, and make sure you share your high scores on the Gear Up Game On MSI promo for a chance to win that $50 Steam gift card. Thank you very much to MSI for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the perks. So on the current live version of the game, it's generally deemed better to get weapon perks onto your armor rather than your weapon, because there are certain perks that are only available on weapons. For example, Keen and Vicious here, and if this was an ideal Ice Gauntlet, it would be Keen, Vicious, and Keenly Empowered. And those three perks, you cannot get them on your armor. They are weapon-only specific, but they do have a massive impact. Now, whilst a perk like Unending Thaw is desirable, it's very powerful, and in a lot of cases it changes how good the weapon is by a dramatic amount. It's, there's not really a reason to get it on the weapon. Why have it on your weapon when you've only got like 3 slots for it here, when you have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, assuming you have a full set of legendary? There's just a lot more sort of real estate on your armor and a very limited number of slots to get perks on your weapons. And I think some are so powerful that you are going to have to go into a weapon that is as good as this and look to sort of swap out some of the slots for a weapon perk instead. Now, in order to make this video easier to navigate, what we're going to do is we're going to put timestamps in the description down below, which means you'll be able to scrub along in the video to find any particular weapon you're interested in. So if you just want to know about the Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet, you'll be able to scrub along and find those sections and my recommendations on whether you do need to update your weapons to have the perks on them, or whether you can just leave the perks on your armor as we currently have it in the standard meta of New World. Now, with the way New World have the test server laid out, it's very difficult to go in and acquire every single perk, and get it on the weapons and on the armor for comparison. There's so much RNG involved with doing that, and quite frankly, I hope they make it a lot better to test out perks, because it's just awkward right now. A lot of, like I say, randomness and just rolling gear and over again without any craft mods. So fingers crossed, Amazon, that you can make a change to that. But thankfully, we do have a tool, as always, our savior, New World Databases here. So what we're going to be doing is going to the database section of New World Database, funny enough, then going down to perks over here, generated, and then finally to item type, and just sorting our way through the weapons here. There's been a really good feature added just today in the past few hours where you can click on a perk and you can see what it does on the weapon as opposed to on the armor or whatever slot you could have it on. So yeah, fantastic stuff here. It's really going to help make this video more streamlined. If you guys do want a link to the website, I'll put it in the description down below. But yeah, let's get started with perks for the sword. How much better are they going to be on the weapon, and do you need to think about picking any of them up in particular? So the sword is actually broken down into 2 different categories. We have weapon perks for the sword and weapon perks, of course, for the shield as well. So I'm wondering, can we put both on at the same time? No, it doesn't seem like we can. Well, let's get started with the shield. So first of all, we have diminishing shield bash. You can see here that it's the same across like every single different type of shield, but Foes hit with Shield Bash have their non-consumable buff durations reduced by 45%. So if you have a Fortify on you, or an Empower, or any other sort of buff that you could put to yourself that isn't food related, it's reduced by 45%. Now, if you have it on your armor, it reduces the buff duration by 30%, so 15% more. Quite frankly, I think there's some pretty valuable slots to have on the shield, including Sturdy, Slash Ward, Ice Ward, Refreshing Evasion, Refreshing. You know, there are some pretty desirable slots, so I think if you are going to be running Diminishing Shield Bash, this is not one that you bother getting on your shield. 15% more is just not good enough. The next perk we have to look at is Fortifying Shield Rush. After hitting a target with Shield Rush, gain Fortify, increasing damage absorption on self by 33% for 6 seconds. Compared to having this on your armor, it's 19% for 6 seconds. Personally, in my opinion, this is definitely one to go for. This is the shield perk to have on your shield. 33% Fortify is very, very strong. Considering the Fortify cap is 50%, you're getting like a significant way there. And with all the other Fortifies you can get from the Sword and Shield tree, you're going to be hitting the Fortify cap very easily by having this one on your shield. A must-have, in my opinion. So with Accelerated Defiant Stance, the numbers on the New World database don't seem to be quite accurate to what we're seeing in game. Now, which one is correct? I'm not entirely sure, but we'll go with what is being said in game here. So it says movement speed increased by 33%, incoming healing by 13% for 6 seconds after triggering Defiant Stance, as opposed to having it on the like armor. It's 19% movement speed and 7.7% increased incoming healing. So 5% more incoming healing, and what is that? About 14% more movement speed. It's not bad, but you compare it to Fortifying Shield Rush, I just think this is the stronger perk, and this is really what you want to get on your weapon. But if you're not using Shield Rush for whatever reason, probably look to get Defiant Stance on your shield as well. So that is the shield perks covered. Moving on to the sword perks now. The first one we're going to take a look at is Contagious Reverse Stab. It's basically a difference of 5%. Reverse Stab deals 15% more damage if you have it on the sword, whereas just on your armor, its Reverse Stab deals 10% more damage. Now, considering that there is Enchanted out there, which is like 9.8% more damage or something like that, I just don't think this is worth it. 5% more damage. Just if you are going to use it, keep it on the armor. There's no point getting it on your sword. Next up is Empowered Whirling Blade. Its base damage increased by 49%, and base damage increased by 30%. So 19% more damage. I think that if you are using Whirling Blade, this is a consideration. But you got to remember that the constant question that we're thinking about when we're doing this exercise is, would I replace like Keen, Vicious, Keenly Empowered, Enchanted, you know, all of the good weapon perks? Would you replace it with this? Is it good enough of an upgrade? I think it's just about there. But again, Whirling Blade is a bit of an unusual ability, so yeah, if you are going to use it, probably get it on the weapon, but not really a must-have in my opinion. Empowered Leaping Strike, similar to the other two perks, just increases the damage. It goes from 17% to 31%. That is a 14% damage increase, which I think is very close. I think if it's around 15%, because you think Keenly Empowered, when you do a crit, it increases your damage. In fact, let's just double check, because I don't want to get this wrong. Keenly Empowered is it's 15% after you crit for 5 seconds. So yeah, this is only 14%, and it's only on the one ability as well. So would I replace Keenly Empowered with this on the sword? Probably not. And the same with the Whirling Blade as well. I just think most of the sword perks, you probably keep them on your armor if you are going to go ahead and run them. So next up, we are taking a look at the Rapier. The first ability that comes up is Keen Tondo. So Keen Tondo increases crit chance by 21% against targets affected by Tondo's Bleed, whereas if you have it on your armor, increases crit chance by 12%. Now, compared to Keen, the perk itself, that increases your crit chance by 12% just overall. So would you replace Keen with Keen Tondo? I don't think so. Could you do it in conjunction with it? Yes, but would you give up Vicious or Keenly Empowered? Probably not. So I think this is one to leave on your armor if you are going to be using the perk. Deadly Flourish, it says that Flourish deals 39% more damage versus targets below 50%. Well, you have it on your armor, it's 25% more damage versus targets below 50%. So that's an increase of 14% on the damage. Again, using the baseline of Keenly Empowered, I think it's just a little bit underwhelming, and therefore I would keep this one on your armor. Leeching Flurry goes from giving you 29% lifesteal effectively with the ability to 47% lifesteal. Now, not that many people use Flurry. I think it's mainly just for use for solo PvE and like sort of tanking and keeping yourself alive. in that specific instance, I do think this is one that you go for on the weapon. But again, it's only if you're doing like some sort of solo PvE boss grinding challenge kind of thing. Sundering Riposte basically increases the rend. It goes from being 15% for 10 seconds if you have it on your armor to 24% for 10 seconds if you have it on the rapier itself. I think Riposte is an incredibly good ability, adding a rend to it that is almost, I think rend caps out at 50%, or is it 30%? Yeah, I think it's 30% on rend actually, so you almost hit rend cap by riposting somebody, and it lasts for 10 seconds. This seems like a no-brainer in my opinion, especially for Lifestaff users pairing the Rapier with the Lifestaff. If you're gonna be using a Rapier, make sure you get Sundering Riposte on it, because that's some pretty good contribution to killing the enemy there. Omnidirectional Evade basically gives you a 9% increase in damage for 2 seconds after using Evade. Again, if we're comparing this to Enchanted or Keen or Vicious, Keenly Empowered, I just don't think 9% is good enough, so if you are going to be using this perk, I think this is just one to keep on the armor. Finally, for the Rapier, we have Refreshing Flesh. It goes from a 19% cooldown having it on your armor to 33% if you put it on the weapon itself. Now, whilst I do think this is a pretty good perk to have as a Lifestaff Rapier user, maybe, you know, gives you a little bit more cooldown reduction, I think you choose between this and Sundering Riposte, and Sundering Riposte is just much better. So yeah, probably a perk to keep on the armor, although it is worth considering if for some reason you're not using Riposte, but you are using Flesh in a build. Yeah, it's okay, but probably not good enough, so keep it on the armor. Moving on to the Fire Staff, there's some pretty good abilities in here. I think that a few of them that a lot of people use on their armor. Are you going to be swapping them over to the weapon though? Well, in the case of Refreshing Pillar of Fire, the ability cooldown goes from 14% per enemy hit with Pillar of Fire to 25% per enemy hit with Pillar of Fire. I think in PvE, like if you're doing Genesis runs, this might be one to consider getting on the Fire Staff, but generally, I don't think it's good enough, and also compared to some of the other Fire Staff perks, if you are going to be using this, I think you just keep it on your armor. Empowering Meteor Shower, it looks pretty underwhelming, and in my opinion, it is pretty underwhelming. But if you have it on your Fire Staff, it's 2.9% empower for 10 seconds, up to 10 stacks, so basically a 30% empower versus 2% empower if you have it on your armor. So it goes from like 20% if you get all 10 stacks to 30%. So 10% more empower. But again, referencing it to that Keenly Empowered. Keenly Empowered is 15%. This is only 10. So yeah, I don't think you're replacing Keen, Vicious, Keenly Empowered, blah, 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 with this on your Fire Staff. Empowering Fireball, in my opinion, is one to get on the Fire Staff. It increases the damage from 32% to 58%. That does break over our threshold of Keenly Empowered. Now, of course, it only does apply to the Fireball, but I think Fireball is like a staple part of a mage's rotation in both PvP and PvE. And having it hit for almost 60% additional damage, it's pretty juicy. So yeah, this is one that I think you want to look to get on the Fire Staff. Stable Incinerate basically gives you 8% additional damage. Again, when we're comparing it to other perks that you can have on the weapon, I just don't think 8% cuts it. So if you are going to use this, probably just keep it on the armor. But even then, yeah. Accelerating Flamethrower. I think this is a good perk if you are going to be using Flamethrower. However, it doesn't seem like the benefit of using it on the Fire Staff is big enough. It only increases the burn from the Flamethrower. It makes it last 4% longer. That seems very underwhelming. I'm kind of suspicious that this might actually be a little bit better in game. But unless the movement speed is going to be like significantly better, again, this is just one that you keep on your armor if you are going to be using the Flamethrower ability. Lastly, we have Efficient Burnout. It says, until your next hit, you deal 33% increased fire damage and your mana regeneration rate is increased by 20% for 8 seconds. And that is going from 19% increased fire damage, and it keeps the same mana regen rate. So we're looking at 14% more damage again, but it's only on your next hit. So yeah, if it was like a flat 14% increase in damage for 8 seconds, I think that'd be pretty good, but only one extra hit and only dealing 14% more damage, I just don't think it's good enough. So yeah, if you are going to bother using this perk at all, keep it on the armor, but definitely not one that you want to slot onto the Fire Staff, replacing any of the other current good perks we have. Now we're going to talk about the Lifestaff perks. Obviously, this is something that I'm very knowledgeable about. We do a lot of Lifestaff content on the channel. So starting off with Refreshing Divine Embrace, it increases the cooldown from 41% to 69%. Nice. And also, you get max mana. Now, I have checked the tooltip in-game. It's more than 1% max mana. So looking at the numbers in the game, it is, again, we get the 69%, and it's 5.8% of your max mana versus, that's the wrong one, versus 3.5% of your max mana on your armor. So yeah, like only a 2%, or what is that? Like a little bit more than that mana. And the cooldown, obviously, it's a decent amount. It's almost 30% more cooldown reduction. But in my opinion, the cooldown reduction is already good enough on Refreshing Divine Embrace. And compared to some of the other perks that we're going to be looking at, I think this is one that you still just keep on your armor. However, it is good enough that if you did decide you want to run it, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be judging. Fortifying Sacred Ground increases the Fortify from 9.7% to 16% if you have it on the Life Staff. In my opinion, this is a yes, please, and thank you very much. You want to get this on the Life Staff. Fortify is a very desirable perk or buff that you can have in any form of content from PvP to PvE, and providing 6% extra, although it doesn't sound like a lot, I think it's worth going for, as Sacred Ground is going to be universal in pretty much every Life Staff build. Purity of Light makes the Splash of Light ability heal for 85% of your weapon damage if you have it on the weapon, versus 48% of your weapon damage if you have it on your armor. Now, from my testing with this ability, the extra heal doesn't scale off of your focus or your like outgoing healing. So if you have Intensify or Bend Light or Blessed on your Life Staff, none of those seem to increase the size of the heal, which unfortunately for me just means that you're not going to bother wanting to get this on the Life Staff in particular. It's not worth giving up Fortifying Sacred Ground, Mending Protection, Blessed, Refreshing Move. Think of the other desirable perks we want in the Life Staff. This is just not good enough in my opinion. If you are going to be using Splash of Light, probably worth getting this on your armor though. It's just a little bit of extra healing, but individually the perk, I just don't think it's worth, the one-off slot that you can have on the Life Staff. Mending Protection, in my opinion, is going to be the go-to perk to have on the Life Staff, along with Fortifying Sacred Ground. It increases healing power by 42% for 3 seconds if Aura Protection heals somebody under 50%. Right now, if you have it on armor, increases healing power by 24% for 3 seconds. So almost doubling the healing from having it on the armor versus having it on the Life Staff. This is a no-brainer in my opinion. I'm using Aura Protection very frequently, and just getting like nearly 20% more increase in healing, that's the same as having like Blessed again, provided you meet the criteria. I think this is very powerful, and this is going to be a must-have to have on a Life Staff sitting in your inventory if not being actively used all the time. Accelerating Light's Embrace basically increases the movement speed of the target you heal with it from 18% on the armor to 30% if you have it on your weapon. Now, unfortunately, Light's Embrace did get some nerfs recently, and it just doesn't really see a whole lot of use compared to Divine Embrace. However, I do think in PvP Arena, this might be one that you pull out for some certain situations. If you've got a really aggressive spear or great axe, some sort of melee user that you need to sort of get in and get out, giving them 30% movement speed increase for 5 seconds is not bad. But for the most part, we're not going to be using this ability. So for PvP Arena, get it on the weapon. Most other cases, it's not worth it, for special niche aggro applications in PvP. Lastly, we have Vicious Beacon. This is a complete sort of rework of the perk, what it used to be. It used to be called Revitalizing Beacon. Now, Vicious Beacon increases your crit chance when it heals, or increases the player's crit chance when it heals them for 6 seconds. So it's 6.1% on the armor and 10% on the Life Staff. Now, I personally don't use Beacon that much anymore, but in a war scenario, I think this is absolutely something that you want to have on at least a few healers. You want to have a few healers sort of sprinkled around in your war roster with Vicious Beacon on their Life Staff. Having some Vicious Beacon healers, drop a big beacon on the point, healing like 10 potential, or maybe more, 20 people on the point, all increasing their crit chance by 10%. For 6 seconds, that's very valuable. So whilst it's not going to be useful for everybody, if you think you are going to fit in that role of running Beacon in the war, absolutely get this on a Life Staff. It's pretty substantial. Moving on to the Spear, there are some very good perks here, starting off with Bleeding Sweep. So Bleeding Sweep applies bleed for 17% weapon damage for 8 seconds versus 9.6% for 8 seconds. Now, I think I said there was some very good perks. I don't know if this is particularly one of them, unless you're running specifically some sort of bleed build. I believe this is just going to be one that you keep on your armor. No doubt, like it's a decent perk, you know, it's some extra damage, but I just don't know if it's good enough that you want to put it on the spear and replace Keen, Vicious, Keenly Empowered, etc., or these other perks that we're going to be taking a look at, like Sundering Javelin. So with Sundering Javelin, if you hit a target, it reduces the damage absorption, aka applies rend, and it goes from 19% for 10 seconds to 25% for 10 seconds. Now, a general rule of thumb is the more rend, the better. This is 6% extra rend. However, I just don't know if Javelin, Sundering Javelin, you know, is that good of a perk. I think if you are using it, definitely put it on the armor. But would I go ahead and put this on my spear compared to some of the other perks? Probably not. Leeching Cyclone got some pretty substantial buffs. Right now on armor, at least on the test server, it heals you for 32% of weapon damage, and if you have it on your spear, it heals you for 53% of weapon damage. That's like a 50% lifesteal. Now, I don't really see many people using Cyclone. I don't think I've ever used the ability one time myself, but if you are in some sort of solo PvE scenario, maybe you're trying to like speed clear Merc Guard on your own for some reason, this is probably going to be one to get, but for the vast majority of people, I don't think you want to be putting Leeching Cyclone on your spear, and I'm not even sure if you want to put it on your armor, to be honest. Fortifying Perforate is an insanely good perk. I think this is going to be a must-have to have on a lot of people's spear if you are running Perforate. It gives you a stack of Fortify, which increases your damage absorption by 17% for 6 seconds per successful hit, and it's going from 9.6 for every single hit. So that is almost, what is that, 7.5% more, give or take. Now, Perforate has 3 hits to it. If you land all 3, that's 3 times 17, 51%. So you actually go over the Fortify cap with this one, which you could say is wasted potential. And I could see the argument for that, but I think being able to hit Fortify cap, 51% Fortify consistently, and how frequently you can spam this ability, this is going to be one to definitely have on the spear. If you're using Perforate, it feels like a no-brainer. However, another big contender for the spear is Enfeebling Skewer. It increases the weaken that the Skewer ability applies from 24% on armor to 44% on the weapon. Now, to my understanding, the weaken cap is 50%, so you can reduce somebody, whether it's an AI or a player's outgoing damage you can reduce it by up to 50%. So you're almost hitting it with just one single ability alone, and it's for 8 seconds as well. I think in a 1v1 scenario, it's going to be a bit of a toss-up between, do you want the Fortify with the Fortifying Perforate, or do you just want to reduce that outgoing damage? Either way, I do think this is a perk that you want to get onto a spear. You hold it in your inventory. If you're going to be using weaken, especially in some certain boss fights, this is going to be very desirable. The Perforate may be a bit more solo orientated, and this for more group play. Lastly, we have Keen Vault Kick. It increases the crit chance. It goes from 19% for 5 seconds to 36% for 5 seconds. Again, I think this is another pretty good one. We're comparing it to the powerhouses of Enfeebling Skewer and Fortifying Perforate. I'd say this is the weakest one, which is crazy because the crit chance is a massive increase. But I think you're already critting so often on the spear anyway that a lot of this is going to just be like sort of wasted extra crit chance. So it is potentially worth having this on a spear, but it wouldn't be my like go-to compared to the other options that we previously spoke about. So yeah, probably keep this one on the armor, bearing that in mind. So with bow perks, the first one we're going to take a look at is Enfeebling Poison Shot. Poison Shot applies weaken, reducing target's damage by 14% for 6 seconds. If you have it on the bow, it's 25% for 6 seconds. Now, when you think about a best in slot bow, like the Lazarus bow has Keen, Enchanted, and Vicious, would you replace any one of these perks with a 25% weaken? In my opinion, not really. It's not generally what you're looking to do with the bow. Maybe if you're in like a 1v1 scenario, but usually you just want to hit people very hard, and I don't think that's what Poison Shot does. So if you're going to use it, keep it on the armor. Otherwise, it's not one to have on the weapon itself. And moving on to Energizing Evade Shot, the numbers are actually a little bit off here on New World Database. When you have it on the bow itself, the cooldown reduction is 25%, and if you have it on your armor, it's 14%. That's at 600 gear score. Evade Shot is used fairly consistently in PvP, and especially in like 3v3 arena or smaller scale PvP, getting that a little bit extra stamina and a little bit more uptime on a pretty good like evasive ability like Evade Shot, I think it is worth considering. The Lasting Rain of Arrows perk makes the bleed and slow go from 20% to 30% on the bow. I don't think the 10% increase is really that good enough. So if you are going to use this one, just keep it on the armor in my opinion. Penetrating Rapid Shot increases the armor penetration this ability does from 19% to 33%. In my opinion, armor penetration is a very, very strong sort of tool or perk, or I don't know what you'd call it, category in the game. So if you are going to be using Rapid Shot, I think this is definitely one to look at getting on the bow, especially if heavy armor is going to be coming back into the meta. The more you can penetrate into the armor, the quicker you can kill those usually beefy targets. Refreshing Penetrating Shot increases the cooldown or decreases the cooldown from 14% to 25%, but it's if you get a kill and it's only 11% more. I think this is pretty underwhelming, especially compared to some of the Musket Perks, which you're going to see later on. So yeah, if you are going to use this perk, keep it on your armor, but even then, I just think there are like generally much better perks across all slots. Finally, we have Empowering Explosive Arrow, which is one of the new abilities that got added with the July update. It increases your Empower. So if you have it on armor, it's 19% for 10 seconds. If you have it on the bow, 34% for 10 seconds. So we are looking at a 15% Empower. However, it's only on the next attack, I think. Increased damage by 34% for 10 seconds or until the next attack. Yeah, so comparing this to Keenly Empowered, I believe Keenly Empowered just increases all damage for the duration that it's live, whereas this is only on your next attack. So yeah, unfortunately, you would have to drop like a perk of equivalent strength like that to get this, and I just don't think it's worth it. So yeah, probably one that you just keep on your armor. However, it is nice, you know, it's a nice little bit of burst damage. So maybe in a burst build, you know, if you're looking to just like end out a 1v1 real quick, this is one to put on the bow. But generally, just get it on the armor. Starting off with Empowering Armor Breaker, it says if the ability breaks a block, the next attack within 5 seconds deals 50% additional damage. Now, 50% is quite a bit, but it's only on one single attack, and it's only if you meet the specific requirements of it breaking a block as well, which I just think makes it very niche. So yeah, if you are going to bother using this perk at all, I think you probably just keep it on your armor. Don't bother slotting it into the Warhammer. Refreshing Mighty Gavel reduces the ability's cooldown by 14%, up from 9.8%. Now you can have like multiple, well, 2 activations per impact. However, again, you know, we're comparing it to the limited number of slots that you can have on your Warhammer. There's only 3. Would this become one of them? In my opinion, probably not. So just keep this on the armor if you are using the Mighty Gavel ability. Penetrating Wrecking Ball just increases the amount of armor penetration you get. Now, right now, we're in a bit of a light armor meta. However, Amazon have announced their plans to buff or make like heavy armor feel more viable in PvP, which is basically where this is going to see play. I know some people do use this in PvE as well. I think if you are going to be using the Wrecking Ball ability, this is probably one to get on the weapon. Armor penetration is a very strong sort of ability or category, as we mentioned with the bow. So yeah, if you are going to be using this, consider slotting it in on the Warhammer. Sundering Shockwave is a very powerful perk that's currently used for a lot of Warhammer users on the live version of the game, and I don't think this is going to change after the update. If you have it on the weapon, it basically applies 4% extra rend. Now, 4% isn't a whole lot. Would you give up, you know, your Keen or your Vicious or your Thwarting Strikes or whatever on the Warhammer for this? In a war scenario, if you can apply that rend to multiple targets, I think it is worth considering. So yeah, specifically for a Warhammer, I would consider getting Sundering Shockwave on the weapon itself. But definitely, you know, if you're not going to do that, make sure you have it on your armor. Repulsing Clear Out, I think this ability is just here for the meme value. However, I am going to be doing some Life Staff Warhammer, and you bet your biscuits, I'm going to be getting Repulsing Clear Out on the Warhammer for that extra big knockback. But generally, not really one that you want to bother going for on the Warhammer, just again, for the memes. Lastly, we have Leeching Path of Destiny. This increases the amount that the Path of Destiny heals from the damage that it does. It goes up to nearly like a 50% lifesteal. I think, again, in big group scenarios, this is probably one to consider. However, choosing between this and Sundering Shockwave, I think the Shockwave is going to benefit everybody else more. But, you know, if you're looking to be a bit of a tanky boy on the point or something and you're using the Warhammer, this is probably going to be one to pick up, again, on the Warhammer. Arriving at the Musket, the first perk we're going to take a look at is Crippling Powder Burn. This increases the slow that Powder Burn applies when it hits somebody. Right now, it is a 24% if you have it on the armor and on the weapon. And then after the July update, having Powder Burn on the weapon will increase the slow to 42%. Now, when I think about Musket, generally, I think the idea is to just try and do as much damage in a single hit as possible. So This doesn't really achieve that goal, but if you want to be annoying, holy flip, that, nearly a 50% slow for 5 seconds from like a really long range. I'm really not looking forward to playing against this in Outpost Rush. So yeah, if you want to be annoying with the musket, this is going to be one to slot on the musket for sure. Refreshing Power Shot is one that sounds really OP. I don't know if it is actually going to be that way though. Basically, if you get kills with Power Shot, the ability itself, on the armor, it's 54% cooldown reduction. If you have it on the musket, it's 98% cooldown reduction. I think specifically if you are trying to power level the musket or just make some sort of cool montage clip of killing things with the musket back to back, yeah, consider getting it on the musket. But for most other cases, put it on your armor or maybe don't even bother with it at all. Empowering Shooter Stance, I think, is one that you do strongly consider getting on the musket. It basically puts you at the empower damage cap of 50%. So increasing damage by 41% for 3 seconds when you hit somebody when you're in Shooter Stance. It's 23% on the armor, 41% on the weapon. And as I mentioned, the cap is 50%, so I think the negative is that you may be going over the cap because I believe there's quite a few other empowers on the musket as well. But if your goal is just to hit as hard as possible, which I think is generally like the playstyle of the musket, probably one to consider. You're going to have to drop your Keen or your Vicious or something, but yeah, it's a pretty substantial damage increase. Repulsing Stopping Power, just like with the other knockback on the Warhammer, I think this is only one for the meme value. Don't believe you're going to be actively putting this onto the musket. But again, if you got a meme musket and you want to stick it in your backpack and just, knock some people back off walls in Outpost Rush occasionally, it's a fun one, but I don't think it's a must-have on the musket by any means. Accelerating Traps increases your movement speed after you deploy a trap. It's 19% on the armor, 33% on the weapon. Again, looking at the musket playstyle, why not just pull out a rapier and use dash to get away? I don't know why you would want to have the accelerating traps for the movement speed. So yeah, probably just keep it on the armor if you are going to be using this perk. I don't think it's worth going out of your way to get this onto the musket. Mending Sticky Bomb increases the heal from 21% to 31%. I think only increasing the healing by 10% is pretty lame. And again, going back to the musket playstyle, do you want to be self-healing that much? No, I think you just want to be trying to kill the opponent. So yeah, comparing this to, the empowering Shooter Stance or just, again, enchanted and other perks that you want in the musket, I don't think this is one that you bother going for. The Hatchet has undergone quite a few reworks in the July update, so this is going to be hard to rate exactly how good some of these perks are. This is one that I think is currently the same as it was on live. So when you successfully hit with Feral Rush, you cause a 29% slow for 3 seconds versus a 20% slow. It's only a 9% increase in the slow. I don't think that's really worth putting, taking a slot off of your Hatchet to put this on. But probably one to consider, using on the armor at least. Keen Berserk goes from increasing your crit chance by 14% while under 50% HP to 27% while under 50% HP. So that is, 13% more crit chance. So we're only just slightly better than Keen, which I believe is a 12% crit chance. And again, it's specifically while you're in Berserk and while you're under 50% HP. So yeah, I just don't think it's going to be that good to consider putting this one onto the Hatchet. Refreshing Torrent increases the cooldown reduction every time you land a hit with the ability with Raging Torrent. If you land all 4 attacks of Raging Torrent, that is a 33% cooldown reduction to everything on the Hatchet. Maybe worth considering for some solo PvE builds. Again, if you're trying to clear out Merc Guard on your own, or for some speed runs to have ability uptime. But again, it's a bit of fringe use, so most of the time I don't think you bother going with this on the Hatchet. Empowering Rending Throw increases the damage that specifically your ranged Hatchet attacks do to the target. It goes from 21% to 31%, so that's 10% extra damage. Now, if we compare this to Enchanted, it says light and heavy attacks deal 9.8% more damage, and that is all of your attacks versus, this specific window here of having Rending Throw up and then only being your ranged attacks. So yeah, comparing the two together, 9.8 versus 10% damage, I think it's not really worth replacing your Enchanted, your Keen, your Vicious with this one in particular. Refreshing Distancing Throw reduces its cooldown, to my understanding. If you're within 6 meters, it can reduce the cooldown by up to 50% versus 30% on the armor. 20% extra cooldown is pretty noticeable, that is a pretty good number. However, I still would be inclined to take this one on the armor. I don't think it's just not powerful enough to consider slotting it on the Hatchet, as opposed to the other good perks you could get there. Exhausting Infected Throw It says that if you land the ability, it reduces the target's stamina regeneration by 30% for 10 seconds versus 20% for 10 seconds. So 10% extra if you have this on the weapon. I think reducing people's stamina regeneration is a very powerful effect in like 3v3 arena and stuff. So this is going to be one to play around with. Kind of hard to evaluate how good it's going to be currently. It's like kind of bugged on the PTR and just stuns people for 10 seconds. But yeah, I think this is good enough that it's worth trying having it on the hatchet, but I wouldn't go out of your way to make sure that you have this. So with the Great Axe, some of you guys might be glad to hear that if you have a best in slot Great Axe currently now on live, aka like Keen, Refreshing Move, and Thwarting Strikes, I think it's basically the same. Most of the perks don't look to be that good that you would want to replace with any of those other perks that I listed. For example, starting with Refreshing Charge, it says hitting a target with Unpredictable Strike reduces the cooldown by 30%. And then if you have it on the weapon, it reduces the cooldown by 54%. If you guys don't know what Unpredictable Strike is, it's a talent along the charge line. I think it's right at the end of it. It says, during charge, you may press right mouse button to execute a swing. And then it deals damage based on how far you traveled. So yeah, if you hit somebody with that, then it reduces the cooldown by up to half, which is pretty good, but I don't think it's good enough that you can justify running it on the axe. So yeah, again, just keep this one in the armor if you are going to be running it at all. Crippling Reap, in my opinion, is probably one of the best candidates for a perk that you do want to put on the axe. It says if a target is hit with Reap below 50% health, they are slowed, reducing movement speed by 50% for 4 seconds versus 31% for 4 seconds. So reducing a target's movement speed by half is no joke. Especially in smaller scale PvP, this is going to be pretty disgusting. I'm not looking forward to getting hit by this slow whatsoever, especially since like slows do apply to dodges now. So yeah, Crippling Reap, definitely one to worth consider getting on the Great Axe itself. Mending Execute increases the amount of health you get back when you deal damage with the ability. It goes from 30% to 49%. I don't think it's good enough to warrant slotting on the Great Axe itself, but if you are using Execute, definitely one at least worth consider getting on the armor. Fortifying Whirlwind basically gives you more Fortify. It doesn't seem to impact the second part of this, which says it increases your slashing damage. I'm not sure if this means slashing damage absorption or just the slashing damage itself. But either way, you can get 5 stacks of 10% Fortify if you have it on the axe itself. So 50% Fortify, that is the cap right there, which is pretty good. If you can hit Fortify cap with one ability, I think it is worth considering. So yeah, if you're going to be using Fortifying Whirlwind, especially if you're doing like a sort of tanky Great Axe use case, then yeah, one to definitely consider putting on the Great Axe itself. Enfeebling Maelstrom increases the power of the weakened, so that lowers their attack damage. It goes from 25% up from 14%. So that is an 11% increase in the weaken. Now, whilst that is not bad, I just think comparing it to some of the other Great Axe perks and comparing it to Keen and Vicious and all the other usual stuff, I just don't think it's particularly strong enough that you take it off of the armor and put it onto the Great Axe. Lastly, Insatiable Gravity Well, which is a mainstay for Great Axe users everywhere. If you are using Gravity Well, you have the perk, basically. Do you need to get it on your weapon, though, or do you just keep it on your armor? Well, it basically just increases the amount of health you get back from the damage that it deals, which I don't think is the most powerful part of Insatiable Gravity Well. In my opinion, the thing that makes this perk strong is the fact that it casts another burst. That part of the ability isn't changed whether you have it on the weapon or the armor. So in my opinion, just keep this one on the armor. Moving over to some more magical weapons, we have the Ice Gauntlet, and we've got some new perks on here like Unbroken Winds. It says Wind Chill has grit and deals 40% more damage, gain 10% mana after a full Wind Chill burst. Versus Wind Chill deals 25% more damage, gain 10% mana, blah, 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 blah. So it's 15% more damage. I mean, you know, we compare it to the Keenly Empowered. It's on the same power level as that. So whilst Wind Chill, I think, is a bit of a meme ability, if it has grit, maybe it's going to be stronger. And if it is stronger and you do end up using it, then I could see this being one that you do actually run on the Ice Gauntlet. So although we're going to put it into the meme category, I think if you are using the ability, consider getting this on the Ice Gauntlet itself. Unending Thaw is a powerhouse of a perk. This is something that pretty much all ice mages use on their armor. Now, if you have it on the weapon, it basically increases the actual damage Ice Storm itself does. So it goes from Ice Storm deals 5.8% more damage to Ice Storm deals 10% more damage. So that's at 4% more damage. And again, when we're weighing up, like, well, what other perks can we have on the Ice Gauntlet? I think Keen, Vicious, and Keenly Empowered. Is it stronger than any of those? I don't think so. So in my opinion, just keep this one on the armor, but definitely is a perk that you do want to have. The second part of it just stays the same with the armor and the weapon. Iced Refresh will give you a significant cooldown reduction if you kill something with Ice Spike or with the different parts of Ice Spike, you know, the not the actual spike itself, but the spikes that come out of it. It goes from a 43% cooldown reduction to a 75% cooldown reduction. However, I think Ice Spike itself as an ability is pretty underused and quite weak these days. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think it got nerfed even more with the July update. So yeah, probably not really one that you want to bother with on either the weapon or armor, unfortunately. Deadly Frost remains largely the same whether you have it on the Ice Gauntlet or just a piece of armor. It basically just reduces the cooldown. It goes from 9.8% cooldown reduction to 14% cooldown reduction. So 4.2. If you think about just having refreshing on a weapon, though, I don't know what is a max level refreshing. Let's see. Yeah, it is 2.9. So it's a little bit stronger, 1% more than you would get on refreshing. However, that only applies just to the ability itself. So whilst this perk is probably worth considering having on the armor, I don't think it is one that you go out of your way to get on the Ice Gauntlet. Pylon Burst I do think is a bit of a wild card perk currently. I have seen some people suggesting that Ice Pylon is going to be a go-to ability in the next patch. I'm not sure if I buy into it, but if you have it on the Ice Gauntlet, it increases the damage it does. It goes from 5.9% more damage to 10% more damage. It doesn't increase the radius or anything else though. So yeah, only 4% more damage. Is that going to be better than the Keen, the Vicious, the Keenly Empowered? No. So I don't think you bother getting this on the weapon itself. Lastly, we have Healing Tomb. This perk was reworked a little bit. It's just a heal of your base health after the ability ends. I'm not sure if you can like detonate or like cancel it early and still get the effect. But either way, if you have it on the Ice Gauntlet versus the armor, it's 12% extra healing. I think if you are playing like a Ice Gauntlet, Void Gauntlet tank, or you're doing Sword and Shield Ice Gauntlet, you know, I've seen a few people out there running some weird builds like that in War, including myself. This is probably one to get on the Ice Gauntlet, but that is a very specific use case. For the vast majority of Ice Gauntlet users, I think you just keep this on your armor. But definitely one that, you know, if you are using Entomb, it is a decent perk. The Void Gauntlet has some pretty powerful perks that do get some significant upgrades while they're on the weapon. Others are not so good, but starting off with Voracious Blade, it says, while below 50% health, successful Void Blade hits heal yourself for 51% of the damage done. So 50% lifesteal, going up from 30% on your armor. I definitely think this is worth, you know, one considering having on the Void Gauntlet itself. Maybe in wars and stuff, not that useful, but for small scale PvP arena or doing dungeons and stuff like that, I do think Voracious Blade on the Void Gauntlet is going to be the go-to choice. Next up, we'll take a look at Nullifying Oblivion. It keeps the same effect, so it still strips away buffs. The only thing that's different between having it on the armor and having it on the weapon is the cooldown, or like how often it recharges. Interesting, they didn't say cooldown reduction, they said it recharges faster. But yeah, it goes from 9.8 to 14%, so a little over 4% faster. I think that's pretty underwhelming, and as a result, don't bother getting this on the Void Gauntlet. Just get it on the armor. Putrefying Scream is going to be one that you absolutely want to get on the Void Gauntlet for wars and for PvP. Now, it is a bit of a tricky one choosing this between this and Voracious Blade. I think if it was at a push, I'm going to go for this one. There are some builds that use Blade but don't use Scream. In between two, I would say that you keep Voracious Blade on your armor and you get Putrefying Scream on your Void Gauntlet. It reduces targets healing by 40% for 8 seconds, so 10% extra or 11% extra reduction in healing. You're almost at the cap here, actually. The disease or healing reduction, I think, is 50% is the max it can be, so yeah, getting a sizable chunk of that just from one ability, pretty nice. Therefore, Putrefying Scream, make sure you've got it on the Void Gauntlet if you're using it. Diminishing Orb is an interesting one. I don't think that many people use this perk. It's going from reducing targets' non-consumable buffs by 52%. So again, we can think about Fortify, we can think about Empower, stuff like that. Instead, it's going to be reducing the duration of them by 70%. So that is a pretty hefty reduction. However, we're comparing it to Voracious Blade, Nullifying Oblivion, and just general other good perks, you know, Keen, blah, blah, blah. I don't think this is worth, it's good enough to put it on the Void Gauntlet. Instead, just keep it on the armor if you are going to be using it. Slowing Tether is an interesting one. It's a 41% slow, only for 3 seconds, going up from a 31% slow. However, Tether, the ability itself, kind of sucks, so yeah, maybe for some like 1v1s or really annoying people in Arena, you could consider doing it, but generally, I don't think it's worth going out of your way to get this one on the Void Gauntlet. Lastly, we have Refreshing Rupture. Now, I'm a bit torn about this one. It says when you hit a target with Essence Rupture, the Essence Rupture itself recharges 49% faster versus 31% faster on your armor. Now, I do think that for healers, if you're doing PvE, you're doing dungeons, this is probably one that you want to have on a Void Gauntlet. I think like having Blessed, Refreshing Rupture, and Refreshing, or Blessed, Refreshing Rupture, and Refreshing Move or something like that. It's going to give you a really high uptime on the Essence Rupture, which actually provides a pretty decent chunk of healing to your team. I'm not sure if you can sort of drop Essence Rupture onto the enemy, switch to the Life Staff, and that continues to apply the effect, or maybe the Void Gauntlet has to be in your hand, because I do think that is a big part of it. But for those of you who are looking to heal expeditions and dungeons and content out there, I think this is one that I'm going to be getting on my Void Gauntlet for sure. All right, last weapon to talk about is the Blunderbuss, and let's not waste any time here. We have Exhaustive Net Shot. So if you have it on your armor, it's a 34% reduction to the opponent's stamina regeneration rate for 8 seconds versus 57% for 8 seconds. I think this is annoying and potentially powerful enough that, again, in small-scale PvP, this is going to be one to consider going for. Like nearly 60% reduction in their stamina regen rate. It's going to feel like their stamina comes back so slowly. You're going to be so annoying. In the specific case of small-scale PvP, I do think this is one you probably consider putting onto the Blunderbuss. With Leeching Shrapnel Blast, having it on the Blunderbuss, you heal for 24% of the damage done. If you have it on your armor, you heal for 15% of the damage done. So 9% extra healing. I don't think that quite makes the cut in my opinion, so not one that it's worth going out of your way to get it on the Blunderbuss. Venturing Claw Shot increases the empower that it gives you. It goes from 19% empower for 3 seconds or until the next hit to 33% empower for 3 seconds or until the next hit. Now, traditionally, the Blunderbuss is used a lot for like one-shotting people and doing some sort of gimmicky combos. I do know that they've recently changed the Sword and Shield, the Leaping Strike Shield Bash, and then you bang, bang, bang with the Blunderbuss. A lot of that has been nerfed. However, this might sort of bring it back potentially. It's not much of an increase in empower. In fact, it is worse than Keenly Empowered, so probably don't go for it, but it might be worth considering if you're really invested in your Blunderbuss one-shot combo. Plague Splitting Grenades, I think, is good enough. Like, with every ability we've seen so far, if it inflicts disease and it can inflict more disease, I do think it's certainly worth looking at. So, yeah, going from 15% reduction in healing to 24% reduction in healing if you have it on the Blunderbuss. Like I say, I do think it's probably worth checking this out and getting a Blunderbuss with Plague Splitting Grenade on it. Resupplying Mortar Charge is a bit weird. It's like when you kill something with the Mortar Charge shell, you get an empower and you get to reload or something like that. You get like an extra canister loaded into the mortar. But the empower increase is actually pretty meh. It's just a little over 5%. And again, when we compare that to like Keenly Empowered, 15%, I just don't think it's good enough. So yeah, probably not worth going for unless you're trying to do some like AoE farming with the Mortar Charge for some reason in like solo PvE. Lastly, we have Crippling Blast Shot. It increases the slow when you hit somebody. It goes from 19% for 5 seconds to 33% for 5 seconds. Slows are pretty annoying, especially in PvP. It's not that substantial of an increase like we've seen with the Musket, for example. However, again, if the goal is just to be annoying, it's probably worth one considering. For me, though, I wouldn't bother taking this off of the armor and specifically looking for it on the Blunderbuss. So that is going to do it for this video, guys. Let me know what you were thinking about all these weapon perk changes. Is it good for the game? Are you looking forward to grinding out the weapons again to get these perks on them? Do you agree or disagree with any of my verdicts on these ones? And what do you think individually is going to be like the most powerful weapon perk out of here? Like I say, the musket ones look pretty spooky to me. I'm excited for the life staff like buffs as well. It's going to be cool to see other than just Will of the Ancients. There's actually going to be some other best in slot options. But yeah, I thought this video would be useful. If you did find it useful, make sure you go ahead and click the like button. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.